Hello and welcome to the Wellbeing at Work Hub podcast series. The Wellbeing at Work Hub provides our global community of professionals invaluable content, resources, data and tools to help them achieve excellence with their wellbeing and mental health workplace strategies. Go to fowinsights.com for more details.
Hello and welcome to the Hub podcast series. Today I'm delighted to be in Malaysia and Singapore with Malar, Villi and Sharmini Suthan from BeinClarity. Hello and welcome, Malar and Sharmini.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, it's great to have you on our Hub podcast and really interested to hear what's going on in your region. So just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better and set the scene, you want to tell us a bit more about yourselves and what you do at BeinClarity?
Okay. Well, first off, I need to say that you're very brave to invite us both at one go for a podcast. So good on you, Chris. Your resilience and motivation is showing. All right. So a little bit about BeinClarity. We typically would say that we are a learning and development firm. And we've been in the space of learning and development for the last 30 years. Though we have physical offices in Singapore, so I sit in the Singapore office and Malar has her own entity in Malaysia. Out of these two physical locations, we do a lot of work around the Asia Pacific region. Now, you might ask then, what's that all about? What kind of work do we do? So specifically, the work we do is in the area of influence and culture. And today, what we'd like to do is, and of course the conversation is, it's pegged in that space of culture, isn't it? It's primarily around what we work in the space, the areas that we work in, which is optimal performance. Now, optimal performance, you might ask, what's that? Optimal performance may be a result of employee engagement activities that happen in organizations, may be a result of well-being activities, maybe an outcome of employee experience. So if you think about that, we work in terms of measuring optimal performance. We look at building awareness within an organization on optimal performance, as well as skill building. And it goes right across individuals, teams, as well as and then of course organizations. So that's in a nutshell what a very broad picture of what Malar and I do in this space called optimal performance and in BeinClarity.
Fantastic, and such a key area for the workplace. So just before we go into the more technical stuff around engagement, I'm just interested to hear, we've gone through a huge change in 2020. Just interested to hear what's going on, what sort of trends you're seeing in the region as we come out of lockdown. What sort of trends you're seeing that are really working well in Singapore or Malaysia?
I think it's through observation and patterns that we have detected, and it's not just patterns during the lockdown, but I think it's also patterns that were pre-COVID, if you will. So I'm going to just maybe take us through the three. I like to talk about Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. So I'm going to tackle it in terms of the country that went into lockdown first. And surprisingly, it was Indonesia that went into lockdown first. They essentially cleared Jakarta, the city, and got people working from home fairly ahead of the curve compared to Malaysia and Singapore. And so let's start with Indonesia. Now, Indonesia has a very interesting pattern that Malar and I both spotted. Indonesians are highly social beings. their social structure, the social network defines them really. They define themselves, or they look at themselves being social beings, right? What do I mean by that? For most of us, friendships are built at high school, secondary school, universities, right? The true friends that we have. In Indonesia, they make friends and true friends even at work. So when they leave an organization and go off to another organization, those friends, they come with them. So their social network grows, right? Right through their adult years as well. And they really are strong friends. And so one of the things that we're seeing happening right now is that you're getting HR teams telling us about how the frustration they get from not meeting up with their friends.
Yeah.
Not being able to go into functions with their friends, be it, coffee or just a dinner, or, birthday parties, or weddings and stuff like that. So that is at the social community level, right? So the network is very important. So that's where they're being stretched and where they're feeling stressed, I suppose, if you will. Now, if you take that one level deeper, what's interesting is a conversation I had with two clients who happen to be friends. And so these are anecdotal. And I'll own up to that. It's not scientific or anything like that. Now, if you take the dichotomy between introversion and extroversion, right? And you always look at it in a lockdown perspective and you say, oh, the extroverts are going to suffer a lot more. These two ladies are self-confessed introverts. And they went into the lockdown saying, you know what, this is going to be a breeze. We know how to do this. It's so easy. And actually, we're going to love it. Even they are coming out and saying right now, it is a stretch for us. And we are feeling confined. We are feeling that, we want to go out for that coffee. So it's turn it in a loop, this the introversion and extroversion kind of polarity that we used to talk about in terms of how people communicate with each other. So that's Indonesia. Should I go on? Or do you
Yes,
want
please.
Okay. All right. Malaysia. Malaysia is an interesting one. Malaysia has what I call the BB factor in high doses. BB stands for bounce back factor. Malaysia bounces back from almost anything. All right. Malaysians have a way of finding ways to make anything work, whatever it is, right? And it's brilliant. It's brilliant to see how people try to figure their way out, given that whatever whether it's constraints or parameters that are put in place, Malaysians have a knack of finding their way out of it. So the resilience is really high. Now, the thing about that, though, is to ask ourselves, where's the pressure point going to be? Where are the cracks going to show? So it's a metaphor that came to mind, and Malar and I were thinking about it. It's like football, right? You do all that practice. And Chris, what's your favorite club?
I'm a Liverpool fan, actually.
Okay. I have got two Arsenals at home. All right. So here you go. So I don't think you can imagine this, but imagine Liverpool doing all that practice. All right. Waiting for the EPL season to start, and it has started, and they thought they were going to do it, ace it, but they put all the effort into that practice, and they peaked at practice. What's going to happen in the real game?
They're not going to win.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to come down because you peaked, right? So what's the next part of the curve? It's a downward slide. So that is a little bit of where Malar and I see a bit of concern with Malaysians. Are they pushing and overusing that bounce back so much right now that they may not have any in reserve for when things may get a bit more challenging. Adversity might be a bit more higher. What do we mean by that? Malaysia, you're dealing with three things. You're dealing with the health issue, you're dealing with a economic issue that's resulting from the COVID, and you've got a political issue that's coming up. You've got a government change that just happened. It's a backdoor government. So politically, there's lots of changes that are happening, and that's going to impact business. Nobody knows what's going to happen, what new rules, regulations, laws that are going to come in place that might happen how business work. Malar, you're about to say something.
No, I'm glad you said it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, about the backdoor government.
Yeah. As a former Malaysian, I think I still have the okay to say something like that.
Yeah. I mean, just to add on to what Sham is saying, I think, I am very proud when Sharmini mentioned that Malaysians bounce back very well. Yes, we do. I like to believe so. But I think this time it is going to be a little bit different, because in the past, whenever we've bounced back through economic crisis, we've had clear leadership and we are great followers, and we figure out a way to stay afloat and hopefully, swim through. But this time, I'm not too sure whether we have direction. Forget about clear direction. We're not sure whether we have direction. So everyone is just kicking their way through to say, I'll float until there are directions, and we'll have to wait and see where that leads us from an economic setting. Yeah.
No, I think that's really interesting about the how the different regions and different countries are dealing with this, and the talk about bounce back and resilience. That's a key element of the new world. I think one thing's guaranteed is change. But what I would say is this particular situation that we're going through is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you're used to bouncing back, and you use all your energy, to use your analogy, Sharmini, if you use all your energy too early, actually, there's still quite a long way to go.
Yep.
So you were going to talk about Singapore as well, Sharmini.
Yeah. So Singapore. All right. Now Singapore is interesting. Singapore's identity, Singapore and Singaporeans' identity comes from its financial strength. Its standing in the world comes, recognition from a global level also comes from its financial strength or its success. For a small country such as Singapore, zero resources, how it has developed right now is nothing short of amazing. It's pure magic, right? And for Singaporeans, that's a very important identity, especially in this region where it's seen as a leader in terms of economic progress, and that's where we want to be. It's like when Singapore was just post-independence, it was looking at Switzerland, and Switzerland was where Singapore wanted to be. Okay, at one point it wanted to be Sri Lanka as well, but it's kind of gone over there. So for this region, Singapore is the Switzerland that Singapore was looking up to before. Now, and we are also very well trained. Okay, as a nation, Singaporeans are very well trained. So physical social distancing, that was not an issue at all. There was no issue about following the rules. So we follow rules really, really well. There was a little bit of a little bit of constraint and a little bit of murmurings when they extended the lockdown, but other than that, people didn't go against it. So we are trained well in both areas. Yeah. Now, from what COVID has brought to us is something very interesting. It's unexpected, not just at Singapore level, but global level. So now Singapore is fighting something that's not just unexpected in Singapore, it's unexpected everywhere, which means what? There's no precedence. Now, what does this mean to Singapore? For the first time, not the first time, first time in a big way, the reserves and Singapore's identity, as I said, financial strength, right? One element of that financial strength is its reserves. Its reserves are big and deep. And its reserves have been opened and its reserves have been touched. And it's been touched and actually dug into quite deeply. And this reserves came out in 4 different budgets, and it's essentially built around pumping up the economy. But it means that savings are now not as much as what it was before. So that's going to take a bit of getting used to. Also, there's no precedence. Before, we could look to a country and say, okay, this is the way we're going to do it, this is how we're going to do it, and let's go ahead and do it. So there were steps, there was process, there was a system which we could follow. Or we had done this before, we have gone through this before, so now we know how to do it. This time, though, we don't have that. There's no roadmap. What these 2 things are going to do is put a very significant stress in the system. And it will be very interesting to see how it plays out in the Singapore arena, right? For a country, for a group, for a population that's very well trained in following rules. It's also who identifies very strongly with financial strength.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and and obviously, time will tell how that plays out. I guess moving it on to now individual organisations, a big part of that recovery would be the corporate sector. So, if we want high performing teams. If you take the Gallup idea as an example, engaged employees bring 2 to 10 times higher performance. So as we move out of lockdown, how do organisations, do you think, need to shift those conversations around engagement to ensure that we have those high performing teams to move through this phase?
Okay, now, so Chris, what's interesting is we are making an assumption that pre-COVID we were engaged, right? So we're working on that assumption because, whenever we talk about, how do we engage in, or how do we shift conversations around engagement, there's assumption that pre-COVID we were engaged, and that's the assumption we are working on. Now, what does engagement mean? Engagement means that if people were engaged pre-COVID, that means there was optimal performance in these organizations. So there's pre-COVID, there's post-COVID, all right? So when we talk about the shift in conversation that needs to take place, why is there a need for shift? Because the world has changed. Pre-COVID, I was this person, hopefully fully engaged with optimal performance. And I've experienced change with the world, that's COVID. All right, and COVID would have impacted different people in different way. And now post-COVID, when I walk into what people call the new normal, as an employee, what am I engaged? Number one, as I used to be. But as an organization which is represented by the leaders and the managers now have to rethink now and say, hey, how do I re-engage my people? And, at some level, it's actually quite a simple conversation, but it's not going to be an easy conversation because we need to now sit and talk about what has changed for you, what has happened for you and for me, and how do we now restart the engagement process. Now, this is assuming organizations are clear post-COVID where they want to go. Because if they are clear about where they are going, assuming they are clear that, they know this is where our organization is going now with the new normal, work from home, work from the office with all the rules and regulations. Besides that, the essence of the organization, why we exist and what are we going to do now, right? Because some may have had more drastic changes depending on the industry, right? Now, first that, then I need to then as a representing my organization as a manager or a leader, I now need to look at my people and say, okay, how do we bring you back? Now, before I can have the conversation, another assumption we make is that as a manager and leader, I knew what engaged my subordinate, my direct report pre-COVID, right? And these are assumptions that we make, because if that assumption is true, then all we need to do is we need to reset the conversation, which is we have a starting point to have a conversation. But if we are not clear if we assumed that there was engagement, now we need to reset and say, okay, how do I know they were engaged? What were they engaged with? And I need to now start the conversation with that. Now, what does that mean? Very simply is I need a starting point. And sometimes if I don't know where to start and there's it's a bit fuzzy for me, perhaps a clear measurement would be an easy tool to start with, because it's like this yearly health check, I want to be healthy. I'm not too sure whether I was healthy, right?
Yeah.
I do a blood test. I know where I am now, and let's move the conversation forward. So I would think that a tool would matter. And once you have the tool and you can realign it and pin it to the organizational goals with the new normal, then it's about looking at people and say, okay, do we now have the skills that is required for the new normal? And if there are no skills, how do I now upskill or reskill our people? Because that's where engagement is, yeah? They're bringing out the best out of my people. So I have a tool. I need to now then work with the skill. Now, as a leader in the organization, how do I now ensure that our culture can support the new normal? Because it's not the same anymore. What worked in the past may not work now. So it's putting all of this together that and that bringing it together is the conversation that we need to have, and where the managers have the skills and the tools to have the conversation.
It reminds me of the conversation that you and I had, Malar, with a client in Indonesia, precisely. And Chris, what she had essentially was a group of leaders who are having conversations that were pre-COVID conversations. And what do we mean by the pre-COVID conversations? There were conversations about results, KPIs, right? And she came over and said, I think they've lost the plot. All right, that's not the conversation that their team won. So how do we help them navigate this new landscape, right? We've pinned the organization here, and the organization's goals may not change very dramatically. It may be, let's say, reduced because maybe we're not going to hit the benchmarks that we had before, but the benchmarks may be the same. So how can we then pin where the individual is right now? And we need to have a measurement, as Malar was saying, to do that, right? And then navigate ourselves across that. It's just a little bit like a Google map, I think. I need to know where we are
that's
right
a nice
now in order to figure it out.
But I think what one word that I love to use, and I think every business should have it, is purpose. And that purpose may have changed. During COVID, as you say, some industries have been completely transformed and changed, and it's almost, you need to refine that purpose and then start to communicate to your teams and looking at how what skills do we need, and then you start to grow that engagement. I think it's really interesting. So we've talked about what we should do. Where do you think some strategies around corporate engagement missed the mark and are unsuccessful? What shouldn't we be doing?
I'm actually going to tap your brain about that. I want to do some investigative work.
Okay.
Since you've got, because you're in this space, right? You've been in the space of well-being. You organize events that go it's not just in UK and Europe. It's in different parts of the world. and you hear you are in lots of conversations. So what are some of the things, or what are some of the strategies, engagement strategies, that you seem to see a pattern of that organizations use? Yeah, I just wanted to tap your brain on that.
Yeah, I think it tends to be quite a personal choice to that organisation, and I think it needs to be tailored depending on what the industry is, who your workforce are. I think, you know, all of those rules have gone out the window. All of those conversations over the last 6 years that we've had at our events have really changed over the last 6 months, and those rules have changed. But I think, you know, having those core skills of listening, empathy, understanding, you know, showing that compassionate leadership, I think the engagement levels will be far higher. And I think those are the skills now that leaders are really needing to show as we move forward. To really understand, you know, some people are desperate to get back to the office because their situation at home is not ideal. They might not have the space. So to have this blanket, right, we're going to do remote working going forward, that's going to alienate a number of your employees because they're actually really desperate to get back to the office. So I think engagement has to be personal. You have to listen to your workforce and tailor it to what your people need and what your organisation does.
Yeah. Okay. So you coming from a converted point of view.
He didn't buy the trap.
No, he didn't buy the trap.
Didn't buy the bait.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm just going to pick up on some things, some patterns that I've noticed, and then Malar is probably definitely going to come in. I tend to think that employee engagement is a hype word that many organizations have taken as something that we need to put in our HR checklist. Right, and that means perks. It means different types of perks, mental health being perks, yoga classes, the social gathering type of events that people tend to park under employee engagement. And you're right, Chris. It's more than that. And what we've been seeing is that it's now no different. If everybody's doing that, going from one company to one organization to another, it's now seen as a basic package that needs to be in that common Ben package, rather than a differentiator, right? That's all there is to it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I was hoping that, you know, we can bully you a little bit, Chris. Here we can't. So let's go back to the idea of employee engagement. I think very often, I'm not too sure whether you'd agree with me, is that whenever companies talk about employee engagement, they talk about activities, right? So if there are more activities and people are taking part in these activities, let it be yoga or team building or talent development pool, right? These are very loud, active, action-oriented activities which is seen as an indicator for employee engagement, right? So before we even think about employee engagement in that way, I think a lot of times we have sort of missed the mark, because the objective of employee engagement is optimal performance. Because when an individual is performing optimally, then the team will perform optimally and the organization would perform optimally, which means that you bring out best performance, right? And that was the idea of optimal performance. That was the idea of employee engagement. Along the way, we thought of activities that will bring about optimal performance, right? We thought about activities that will bring about optimal performance, and we focused on activities. We forgot about the purpose, as you mentioned. So the purpose of employee engagement is to bring about the best in individuals, which is to focus on their strength. Because when they bring in their best, which is based on their skills, strength, and talent, their performance is 2 to 10 times more, according to Gallup, right? And because we've missed that mark, every time we talk about employee engagement, we're thinking about activities. And one other thing that comes out of employee engagement, one of the issue and challenge that comes out of employee engagement activities actually is that a work-life balance issue. So one of the common thing before pre-COVID is we were talking about work-life balance. It is one of the top priorities of employees because they want to now get into an organization where there's work-life balance. And if you think about
remote working was part of work-life balance, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's quite scary to think that we got what we wanted, right? But when we think about it, a lot of this employee engagement activities actually eat into work-life balance. People actually now, beyond work, need to take part in employee engagement activities, which reduces my balance or my life balance, because now I stay longer.
Yes. Yeah.
At work, because as you had said it correctly, we have missed on the purpose of employee engagement. I think what organizations need to think about, leaders need to think about, why do we want engage employee in the first place? It's really going back to the basic and say why, because along the way we started off well. I think along the way we've missed the mark.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree, and also I think, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on this. But a lot of organisations maybe do some tick boxing exercise. Oh yeah, we've done employee engagement. We've had 2 yoga classes, or we've done, we've done a survey once a year, or whatever it could be, and they think that's it. And I think it's about the culture. We have to create cultures that.
And that's interesting, because this term culture it's becoming it's becoming very popular. I started seeing it pop up a lot more frequently at the start of this year, the term of culture, right? And the use or the thinking or the slant towards trust, and trust being in culture. But at the end of the day, I hope it doesn't end up being a tick in a box as well, because what essentially all these ticks in a box do is that it takes care of the external. The individual is still to some level, to a great degree, untouched, right? And you and I both, all 3 of us, have seen the graphs of where, you see how many people are engaged in an organization, how the pie chart is it's cut up, and the pie for those who are engaged, going by, I suppose, attendance with all these activities, is such a small pie that organizations are throwing lots of money down for just a very small piece of the pie.
Yes, yeah.
Very interesting, right? How are they calculating the ROI? I would be very interested to know how they're thinking about it.
Yeah. So let's talk about another word that's come out quite a lot is happiness. I think pre-COVID we were talking about happiness at work and well-being at work. I'm interested to hear your thoughts around how they're linked. Well-being, happiness. Why do top performance experience burnout? How can we make happiness and well-being part of our workplace work, essentially?
Yeah, Chris, I like the fact that you use the word heart. And I'm just going to ask you, when you are happy, how do you know you're happy, Chris?
That's a good question. When do I know I feel fulfilled? I feel I feel at peace. I feel happy and fulfilled.
Oh my goodness! Thank you very much.
Am I following your script now?
No, you're not following my script. And I was just going to say that whoever's hearing this podcast, he did not know what was coming up. Chris had had no idea what our answer was going to be. So, but he just very lovely led us into the answer.
Yeah,
Not scripted
because
at all.
yeah. Thank you, Chris. Because I think a lot of times when we talk about happiness, we tend to get connected to the Insta happiness that we see. Yeah, the Instagram happiness, the photos of people doing things, people looking happy. And I love the fact that you use the word fulfillment, right? And you know, how do you know you're fulfilled? It comes from deep within. It comes from the heart. So when we talk about happiness at work, I think the real happiness that individuals feel deep within them is a connection that they have deep within with their own purpose, right?
Yes.
And very often we are not talking about that. When we talk about happiness, again, we have strayed away from the true happiness, and we look at Instagram happiness, we look at the group photos and group wefis, and we assume people are happy, right? And what is also interesting is if you look at pre-COVID, while we were seeing a lot of pictures of happiness in the social media, the numbers for ill-being is going up. The numbers for depression was going up, right? And so it's very interesting, because what looks like happiness is not now supported by well-being. So are they connected? So yes, they're connected, provided when we are talking about happiness, we're talking about a sense of fulfillment. So what is fulfillment? We look at fulfillment as where you feel that you are the best of you. So one of the conversations Sham and I were having is to like, okay, how do we define fulfillment, right? So we look at 3 dimensions when we talk about fulfillment, right? When my mom cooks for me, I feel fulfilled. Sometimes I'm full, but I'm filled, sorry, but I don't feel fulfilled, kind of a thing, right? So when we talk about best of me, we look at 3 parts. Number 1 is the best of me comes when I have a healthy self-esteem. I have a healthy belief about myself, right? So there's self-esteem, and then there's a healthy level of self-confidence, right? Now, what is healthy level of self-confidence? Self-confidence is actually your self-efficacy. That means I know I have enough skills to deliver and to get me where I want to go, all right? Right? So I have esteem, belief I can do it. I have self-confidence, I have the skills to do it. And most importantly, these 2 will only become meaningful if I know what's my purpose. Why do I want to do what I want to do? What is the deeper connection for me? And how does my purpose connect to the organization purpose? All right? When the 3 comes together, there is happiness, true happiness that we talk about, right? Now, when you are happy, what happens is that you will stay well, because you have a lot more energy to do more things, you're able to achieve more. But having said that, in organizations, what happens is that when we talk about the best version of you, we are talking about talent, we are talking about top performers, all right? There's also evidence to say top performers are burning out. So let's see what we do to top performers. We take top performers, we put them in a pool of talent, we train them, we develop them, we give them special privileges, we give them special attention. We use them as much as we can. They are the first to volunteer on all sorts of things. They work the longest hours. They cry for help, we give them reward, and then we hope that they don't burn out. That's how we are treating top performers, number 1. Number 2, the best of me is not a competition space. So if you look at best performers or the top performers, we take them and then we put them in a sort of a competitive space, and we say, you look at how well other people are doing. And naturally, when you compete on 2 things. One is, if I've always used my strength, now I overuse my strength, because these are my superpowers. Now I'm thinking, okay, to stay at the top, how much more of my superpowers can I use so that I continue to stand out? Right? Because now the competition is not the best of me, but the best of a group of people. Now, if that doesn't work, depending on what I'm being compared to or who I'm being compared to, I now compare myself with another. And if that person is competing in a space which may be my weakness, then I have a problem, because now I need to compete based on my weakness, which is going to be tremendous stress in my system, and my happiness is just stolen, right? Because I'm not going to be happy trying to compete in an area that I'm not strong in. But in reality, that's what we do to top talents, and then expect them not only to perform well, but we
to burn out.
we assume that, you know, that they are not burning out, even though if you look at records, there are enough signs to tell you top performers are burning out, you know, from their medical record.
Yes.
Right? Medical records are enough to show you there's a trend in terms of visit, there's a trend in terms of painkillers, there are trends in terms of high blood pressure, hypertension that people acquire along the way. All right, and sometimes even the gray hair that they spot if they're not diagnosed.
all of a sudden, right? Overnight, which you don't have any of, Chris. But there's a reason why the USS Enterprise could do warp speed ahead only one time and not 2 times, right? You know the reference to Star Trek, Chris?
Yes.
Know the reference.
Yeah.
You could only do warp speed ahead like once, right? And if you do the second time, this huge monster of this machine stops. So we are basically just wringing out our high performance, and we're not thinking about how to use them in the best way possible. And the best way possible is not short term, but it's medium to long term.
Absolutely. So we're looking for some top tips now for listeners who are tuning in to find out how optimal performance actually thrives in the workplace. So what can you give our listeners that will be some great advice around it really working, and how they can leave this podcast and implement some great new ideas?
I think if you're an organization and you're looking at how do you implement it, you need to have 4 things in place. The first is that it needs to be designed. It needs to be designed for the workplace. And I'm going to use a metaphor. I think you've noticed that I like using metaphors. If you are Lewis Hamilton, you're right. You're in the F1 and you're in a Mercedes, right? How the car performs is what you see. What you don't see are the cogs inside, and it's all really dependent on a big portion is dependent on the engine, how well the engine comes together. And so it's the engine of the organization, or the engines of the people in the organization, right? And from our perspective, optimal performance, the engine of optimal performance has 3 parts. It's EQ, it has resilience, and it has motivation. These 3 parts need to work in collaboration. It needs to work in tandem. If those 3 parts work really well, then that car is going to win. So that's what we mean by design for the workplace. The second is that it needs to be tailored to the individual, right? Lewis Hamilton might get results out of that car much better than perhaps someone else. And so what makes Lewis Hamilton get better results? It's how Lewis Hamilton is wired internally in terms of EQ, the driver is wired in terms of EQ, in terms of resilience and motivation. And we're not going to look maybe at every single cog. Maybe we need to look at certain cogs depending on that individual and depending on what the individual's role is in the organization. What is the individual's role in the team that the individual belongs to as well? So that's the second thing. The third thing is clear measurement. Now, many ideas, many strategies, many activities that fall under employee engagement don't have clear measurement. And what they get is they get the feedback that it's all fluff, it's all the feel good kind of thing. So if you're looking at optimal performance, and if you're serious about optimal performance, you need clear measurement. Why is clear measurement important? It's important for the individual to know, to pin, where am I now? And given that where I am now, why am I doing some things that I'm doing? Why am I getting the results that I'm getting, right? What could be potential outcomes if I change or don't change something? So I need to know where I am now. And the organization, my leader, my manager needs to know where I am now as well, so that we can start shifting if we need to. Either shifting to improve or shifting to shut down. Right, and it's dependent on what the individual's role and objective is. So that's it's all interdependent. And the fourth is a supportive ecosystem. When we started, we talked about how, from our perspective in BeinClarity, optimal performance is about measurement, it's about awareness, and it's about skill building. I talked about measurement earlier on. So what do we mean by awareness? So it's having conversations. We talked about leadership conversations about where is the individual right now? How can I support you? Can I coach you through some things? Yeah. Can we put you in conversation or in groups where they're supportive of each other? How do we build awareness about what's important for you in your role, vis-a-vis the organization's purpose and your own purpose? We also want to be able to build skills. So some things can be worked out through awareness. Some things need skill building, because you need some skills to work through those things that will bring you up to optimal performance, that will bring you up to fulfillment. So 4 things, Chris, organizations need to think about when you're looking at optimal performance. It needs to be designed for the workplace. It needs to be tailored to the individual. It needs to have clear measurements for both the individual and the organization. And number 4, it needs to have a supportive ecosystem. Without which, not going to happen.
A fascinating discussion, and I could speak to you for hours, but time is against us. But before we finish, and you put me on the spot earlier, so I'm going to put you on the spot now. I've been asking people what new habits or behaviours that they've started to do during lockdown that they think may stick, and there's been a wide range of things, new skills, new behaviours. What have you done to help your well-being during this period, and which one of those do you hope stays as we go back to this new normal?
So, Malar, you or I first? Thought so. All right. That one is a difficult one for me. And I'll tell you why it's a difficult one. I've been working from home since 2001. So what to many is a new norm, for me is it's 19 years of practice. Yeah. Having said that, so I worked at all the kinks. I worked at all the bumps in the roads and stuff like that. Most of the bumps on the roads, right? On the road. What habit that I have started and I hope to fix? I'm part of a team that meets every Monday at 8 to 9 in the morning, and it's like a weekly huddle. And it's a weekly huddle where we get together. We're all business owners, small business owners, and we get together to discuss nuggets that we had from last week. It could be personal nuggets, it could be business nuggets. We share what nudges we need for the week that's coming up, and we share learning that we have we had gotten because we've attended webinars or virtual events. Yeah. So I am hoping when things get busy, and busy means when business starts coming in more and more, that we are still able to hold on to that as a support system. And also I see as more than that, we are collaborating. We're collaborating at a personal level, and we are collaborating from a business level. So that is one thing that my hope is, that we hold on to that, and we don't get busyness doesn't get into the way of us meeting every week on Monday, 8 to 9.
That sounds like a very good behaviour. Hopefully that sticks. So over to you, Malar.
Oh boy, I'm glad I had a longer time to think about it. So if there's one habit that I've got, besides the one that Shan has spoken about, collaboration, is because we've been like, I've been running training for about 20 years, right? And I've always done face-to-face. So one of the major shifts that I had never imagined I'll make in my lifetime is to train or facilitate online, right? And being able to do that has, for me, that's probably one of the greatest blessings of COVID. Now, why do I say that? Because I realized that to deliver an online session, I need to be crystal clear about where I'm taking people. My God, I've never prepared so much in my life for a program, right? Now, I've never, right? And that has built my muscles in an area that I would have never thought can eventually be my strength, and that can feed my greater purpose, right? And so my great learning here is very much, sometimes in situations like this, you deep dive, give your best, and then realize that there is another way of contributing to your purpose than you've been stuck with for the last 20 years. So that's a lesson that I hope I continue to remember, even if we do go back to 100% face-to-face, which I doubt. Okay? Mm-hmm. Number one, because you're looking at, I'm having a new experience of efficiency and effectiveness in learning, right? So that's a big shift for me as a facilitator. Now, at the individual level, like Sham, I've no issues working alone, working from home, and all of that. But what is really exciting is that I'm driven by autonomy and purpose. So it's even more exciting having the kids at home and figuring out how to switch on and switch off according to the realities around you.
Yes.
Right. I had more freedom in the past, where I go to work and I know I can switch on, and I've always had difficulty switching off work, where work-life balance was difficult, right? But with the kids hanging around you, now you must form a discipline and learning where your switches are, that you can't say this is the time that I am performing at my best. You need to be able to know where your switches are and say, okay, the kids are occupied, switch on and be your best, because this is all the time that you have. And that's something that I hope I can fix and continue to retain it even when things go back to new normal.
What a great way to finish our podcast. That's great advice, and I've certainly learned that too, Malar. So thank you. Thank you so much for your insights today. It's been really such a rich conversation. Some great content in there. Some great advice for our listeners, and it's really interesting to hear what's going on in your region. So thank you so much. We'll make sure that all of your contact details are next to the podcast, so our listeners can get in touch with you directly. And I look forward to seeing you both in person when we're able to. Thank you so much.
Same here.
Thank you,
Chris. Thank you.
Chris.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget, our Wellbeing at Work Hub has a huge library of similar podcasts and much more invaluable content, resources, data, and tools to help you achieve excellence with your wellbeing and mental health workplace strategies. Go to fowinsights.com for more details.